Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to take a look at basic QTEs. So what we're going to set up is a trigger volume that will allow for the player to come in, give a wrong answer, and get a right answer for a collection of inputs, and then allow you to decide what you want to do with that information. All right, let's get into it. So first thing is that I have this trigger volume here. So this trigger volume is pretty basic in its setup. This may look complicated, but I assure you it's just a number of simple things. Inside of this, we just have a trigger box. Whatever it is that you're going to have that's causing it doesn't need to be a physical object. You can call this same logic from somewhere else, but basically you just need to have a widget that's going to generate, and we're going to send it information about whatever parent is calling it. So the first thing we're doing is checking a begin overlap, checking on the player, and then we're going to create a widget if that is there, if that is a player. So when we have the player controller, we create the widget. We'll look at the widget in just a second. We save off the widget as a reference, and then we create a variable inside of our widget blueprint that will have a reference to the type of thing that would be calling it. So if you have a parent actor or a parent class or object class that you'd want to use, then point it at that. We add it to the viewport, and then we're going to disable the input on the character that belongs to the player controller. This will keep us from looking around or moving. If you don't mind the player doing other things while the input's happening, then by all means leave that intact. Once this happens, then we're going to kick everything off to the widget blueprint, and we'll come back to process the input once everything's been put on screen. For the widget blueprint, basically we just have a overlay here, and in that overlay I've added an image and a text box that I sized up the text about that big and gave it a little outline so it could be readable against the background. This image is 256 by 256, and so it's just sitting inside of this square that's going to pop up in the middle of the screen. Whatever it is that you're going to use to convey, it doesn't need to be an image. Text could be iconography for your inputs or certain buttons or things like that. And before you get too far in any of this, just make sure that if you do want this to be able to receive input, it needs to be focused. So we're going to go up to our parent drop down here in the hierarchy, and we're just going to make sure that is focusable is turned on. So I want to make sure that the image frame and the text are variables. So up here, I'm going to enable the is variable. When I go over to the graph for this, on the event construct, I have I can include a delay if I want to wait once I kick it off to get to the interaction. But for the sake of immediacy, we're just going to throw up an initialize, and whatever we want to do in initialize is going to be called potentially multiple times. So in an initialize, we're going to have a delay before things get started. We're going to make sure that this thing is setting focus to itself so that the input will be captured here. We're going to set the opacity for our image frame here. This is going to make sure that if it gets reused after they have a fail, that it'll return back to its default state. And then we're going to set the text value based off of this thing that we're getting here. So we're going to get the input map, which is a variable I'll show you how to create in just a second, which is going to get the type of inputs that we're going to allow and the text that's going to be associated with those. We're going to get the size of that thing -1, which will give us the minimum of 0 and the max index. And we're going to pick a random integer and range from there. And so once we get that, we're going to set that to a variable called target index. This will just retain for us every time that we say initialize, it'll get a new random item from this list of acceptable inputs. And then at the end, it's just going to go into that same map, and it's going to get the text value out. And we'll use that to set the text value on our key text. Now for the input map, if you're not familiar with this type of variable, basically you just get the input for the key, and then we're going to change it from a single to a map over here and change the alternate type to text. And so this will create a relationship between any of the values we enter into key to represent anything that they would show up in text. So when I create that, it looks like this, where I get the inputs that you should recognize from your IMC configuration, and you can set the same things here. You can even have duplicates and redundancies with controls on them. And then we're going to map to a text field that will allow them to show something on screen consistently. So whatever you guys want that map to be, this will allow you to generate that here, and then it'll be pulled randomly to generate the QTE. We have the target index in the input map to allow for this functionality to happen, and then we have a reference to the owner. This is to allow us to poke back at whenever we've finished this input. We'll show you that in just a sec. When we go to our on key down, this on key down function, if you want to get access to that without deleting all this, it is an override function. So we have the on key up, on key character, the on key down function. When we override that, it comes in with this node here and this node here. What we want to do is take the in key event and pull off get key. This will tell us anytime that a key is pressed or a button is pressed on a controller or the keyboard or the mouse, it'll capture that. We're going to get the key out and we're going to compare it to the target index value from our input map. So to generate the correct input type, you can just pull off this return value and then right click this value and say promote it to a variable. And once you promote that to a variable, it'll be the right type, and then you can convert that to a map. So once you get that set up, the target index will grab the correct input type, and it's just to see if the input that was used is the correct type. And then we'll throw it off to this function called process input, which is residing inside of the blueprint for the QTE trigger. So this process input will handle all the details about succeeding or failing. But before we get to that, this success is going to be passed in through here. So when you have the process input inside of this function here, you just come over to the side and you can add a boolean. This will allow you to pass that information between them. And then anytime you're going to use an on key down, you want to make sure that you're passing something to the return node. It's looking for one of two answers. So it's either looking for handled or unhandled. If you say handled, that means that the input that was given to it is going to be captured and it'll stop there. If you say unhandled, that means that the input was not processed and you want it to what we'll call bubble over, and that'll send it into a kind of a catch system for any of the controller input to see if there's something else that's looking for that type of input. So going back over to the QTE, the trigger volume, it's going to take in that success. If we were successful, we're going to set the tint of the widget to green. And if it wasn't successful, we'll set it to red. If it is successful, we're going to call this success function so we can inherit from this trigger to do other things. And then we can just set each of those successive behaviors to be whatever it is that we need. And there's, of course, a more complex way you could do this if you want to capture multiple correct inputs before moving forward, but this is the basic QTE. We're going to let the correct action start to take place, but we're going to let the green sit on screen for about a fifth of a second, and then we're going to remove it from the parent, and then we're going to enable the input on the player. So we stripped input originally. You want to make sure you return that if you plan for the player to do anything after the QTE. Then we just destroyed the actor of the trigger. If they fail, we'll delay, and then it'll reinitialize the QTE. So when it reinitializes, we go back, it's going to grab a new random integer from in there, which is why we're getting a varied response each time that it gets back to it. And then whatever you want for the success and fail, you can override these in any children class. And that would give you the majority of what you need to push this functionality to whatever bits and bobs you have for your gameplay. There's a lot of opportunity for extension here. Obviously, this is just a simple key press QTE. There's lots of different types of QTEs, but this is how you would get it on screen, capture the input, send it back, and allow for whatever extensible outcomes you want based off of that success or failure. I hope this gets you where you need to go, gives you an idea of what you can do with QTEs, and let you go out there and keep building.